Now, to finish this very first session, after so many decades, we need to go back to fundamentals. It's a dialogue between diplomacy and academia. And it's my pleasure to call Professor Boris Krivokapić, Professor of Public International Law in Belgrade, but also in Russia and Samara. Mr. Krivokapić, I really have one question for you from the very beginning, because when I was a student, my professor in Geneva of Public International Law started his very first lesson saying that he's going to teach us about something that doesn't exist. So tell us more, Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for that question. I will try to answer it at the very end of the show. Ladies and gentlemen, it is, of course, a great honor and privilege to be here with you. But since we are, I prepared something to say, but since we are already running late, according to our timetable, and there was no coffee for us here, it's important. It's a job, of course. I will do my best to be short and sweet. Since I was invited as a public international law expert, of course I will say a few words about my opinion from my point of view about that issue. And at the very end I will try to answer the question you asked. Let me start with history. First norms, it is short. First norms of many people forget that first norms of international law appeared at the very moment when first societies, organized societies, meaning states, had their relation when they had contact. The first norms were of the law of treaty, of diplomatic law, because without that, no possibility of having cooperation, and of course, of what we call today international law of armed conflicts. Of course, it was very beginning at the time, but it started there. And one interesting thing is that the oldest treaty preserved to our days is the treaty between Abu and Abbasal, which was not between Ramses II and Hattusha III, no, this one is older. At least, it was concluded at least 2,250 years before BC, meaning at least 3,300 years it is old, also meaning at least 200 years that treaty is older than the oldest preserved act, the law of Urnam. So, in the next, after that, during the centuries and the millenniums, international law was developing, but the boom, the point where everything exploded, of course, was when UN were founded. I'd like to remind you, of course, that the very UN Charter is at the same time not only statutory of the World Organization, but the most important treaty of international law, in which we find all the major principles. During the years, of course, UN did so much, in so many fields, but I will speak about international law. In diplomatic law, we have the Convention 1961 and so on. In consular law, in the field of human rights, in the field of international criminal law, in the field of international humanitarian law, in the field of international law of the sea, of outer space, and so on and so on. For that, we must say that we are very much alive to the very existence of the UN. Now, we are not only in the beginning of the 21st century, and so many changes, facing so many changes in the world, but we already now know that we need to regulate as soon as possible so many important issues in the dealing with, let's say, once again, outer space, because there will be exploration, but also possible armed conflicts in outer space, dealing with new weapons, completely new weapons, optimized new weapons, artificial intelligence, completely different. Dealing with new subjects in international relations and also international law, such as non-governmental subjects, first place, transnational corporations, becoming more and more economically and in other fields stronger, and possibly tomorrow having their own private armies. Speaking about private armies, having private military companies, very new issue, very new problem. Even the UN started using them in the beginning of 90s maybe it was in Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1992, when the UN started using private military companies. Four companies that used it, the contract was concluded on 4 years. So the remaining, of course, we all know about this transnational organized crime, terrorism, and so on. We need new treaties. We were speaking about multilateral relations. I'm speaking now about universal treaties, such as codifications, and then more than that. That is what we need. That is where UN can help us, as much before. There's many times before. Of course, those old codifications, such as going into concluded in 60s, 70s, the last century, possibly we have to review them and make appropriate to the new conditions. But there is a problem. I speak about international law, and I was asked what is the point of that law, which it is not law itself. I will say, yes, it is law, of course, because at the very first lesson, I start with the same story with my students and explain to them that there are so many issues, how to explain how it is important, why it is law, because there is section. And the people usually ask, what kind of law is that if there are so many breaches of that law? And I say, of course, you cannot break something if it doesn't exist. It has to exist to break it. Then the problem, of course, international has sanctions. Not one sanction, different sanctions. Diplomatic, economic, criminal, so many. It's not on the problem with international law. The problem is something else. Many of you at least know the rules of football game, what you call Euro football, soccer in the States. Ask yourself, when there is an offside. Yes, there are rules that explain that it is when the player, the attacker is okay. But the answer is, the offside is when the referee blows his whistle. That's it. When he decides. So, rules of any law, of any, including internal acts or something, they could be perfect. People are those who decide whether they will implement them, or for some reason break them. Also, in any field, we have breaches of law, which, of course, if law is good, is not good, but somehow it's inevitable, and it does not prevent that the whole system works itself. For instance, I believe there is no country in the world in which all criminals are in jail. Unfortunately, I believe there is no country in the world in which there is no corrupted, I don't know, politician, professor. The problem is, therefore, not in the field of international law, but in the, those people that bring decisions. Sometimes simply they, for some reasons, and sometimes even without any punishment, can do that. That's simply, you know, life is not perfect. Life is not fair. If it was perfect and fair, we would always be young, healthy, rich, and so on. It's not that way. So we have to understand that way. This is a good topic for maybe another gathering. And let me finish with one, because of the time. Let me finish with one also point. Before that, we had the League of Nations, which lasted only 20 years. When it collapsed when of 7 great powers, not superpowers, great powers of the time, only 2 remained in membership. US never was a member. Japan, Germany, and Italy left it. Russia was expelled due to the war with Finland. And at the end of the day, there were only Great Britain and France. Within a couple of months, Second World War. Right. We don't get it. We have 75 years as only start. We need UN. They, of course, virtually this reform is too slow. It must be accelerated, the reform. But we need the UN. We rely on them. And personally, I wish the organization won't live to live for 100 years. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. I am most convinced the public international will does exist. Thank you very much, Professor. So, unfortunately, yes, we are running quite late, but if there is some questions, welcome. If it is not the case, we take a very short break and then we go on with the session 2. Question. If there is a question, we go to the microphone. There is 2 microphones. You can put the questions. Apparently no questions, so ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much for enlightening by your speeches. Thank you very much.